So the other day, I sat down and watched Project Hail Mary, which is a movie from 2026. It's 2 hours and 36 minutes long, and I finished it on the 26th of May. Overall, this is a 4 out of 5. I thought this was a pretty great movie. I am a big fan of sci-fi, and this has a lot of sci-fi in it, but yeah, it's definitely a 4 out of 5. We're going to start off with the positive, and then we're going to talk about the one thing that is the absolute reason why this is definitely a 4 out of 5 and not a 5 out of 5. We're going to get to that. The first thing is that the premise of the movie itself is really great. I love this premise. And if you haven't seen the movie for some reason and you're watching this, I don't know why you're here, but there is something that they call the Petrova line, which was like a thing that was discovered in space. I think it was a line of radiation or something. It's basically some cosmological line that they observe in space that is connecting, I think, Venus and the sun. And basically the sun is like dimming. And it's like we're going to lose 10 degrees on Earth in the next 30 years or something like that. But the point is that something is dimming the sun and we don't know what it is. And we have to figure out why that's happening. And the early part of the movie is kind of like investigating the astrophage is what they call it, which is like the thing that is dimming the sun, to figure out what's going on there and what it's made of, so that then we can go and visit this one sun in the galaxy or some part of space that isn't dimming for some reason and figure out what's happening there. So it's like a bit of a mystery movie. It's obviously a massive sci-fi movie. It's a bit of drama as well. It's just a very fun time. The premise is awesome. Now, the first thing I want to do though is I just want to talk about the sci-fi stuff. So I have a list in my notes here of some of my favorite stuff in this. The first thing is the idea of the Petrova line. It's such a cool idea. Like it feels so grounded where it's like, oh, like I could imagine one day that scientists are like, they're observing some part of space that they really haven't put much effort on. And they're like, oh, what is this line? That's interesting. And then you name it after the person who like discovered it. And then you find out the ramifications of it. Like if I like kind of this sci-fi premise, because I could definitely imagine something like that happening in the real world, right? And that was really cool. The idea that like the microorganisms are like causing this, what a unique idea. Like it's not some weird natural phenomenon of like the celestial bodies or anything like that. It is literally this like bacteria thing that is somehow absorbing radiation and like converting it into their mass or whatever, and it's like super interesting. So I like that. Like the astrophage themselves are super interesting. Then like there's the whole element like midway through the movie when we meet Rocky and we have his ship, and the ship is like so interestingly designed, and it's got like very like, obviously it's entirely made of metal is my understanding. I guess not like most ships are, but I guess it'd be a combination of metal and plastic, right, on human ships. But yeah, it's like made of these really strong lines, and it's like very symmetrical but like weirdly like hollow looking, and like the ship itself just looks super cool. And the way the ship is like tracking the human ship, where like Grace will like go forward in the ship like 3 things, and then like Rocky's ship will follow like 3 like bursts afterward. And it's like, oh, this is so interesting and cool. And I don't know, it's so like, I don't know what the right word is. It's not a mystery. There is an obvious word for this, where it's like you're engaged. You're like trying to figure out what's happening, and it's like super cool. And there's like a million possibilities until they get like narrowed down to what's actually happening, you know? Yeah, but it's really cool. The ship itself is really cool. And then just like all the stuff concerning Rocky. And if you haven't seen the movie for some reason, Rocky is the alien that Grace meets and interacts with. It is like basically his big buddy for the rest of the movie. And they're working together to solve the Petrova line issue, right? But it's everything. It's like the incredibly slow development of their like communication and how it gets better over time. I've seen a lot of alien interaction kind of movies before where it's like, oh, look, this is an alien and we're going to interact with it. Most of the time they are humanoid aliens. And very rarely you get things that like, say, Arrival. That's probably the most famous like movie with non-humanoid aliens where it's like, oh, that's like super interesting. This is one of those where it's like, oh, we don't exactly know how to communicate with this thing. It doesn't have eyes like us, doesn't have ears like us. Like, we don't know what it sees. We don't know what it is. We don't know, like, what, like, behavior is considered normal for it. We're interacting with it through this transparent material that it's formed. Like, all the communication that's happening is because it's driving it, because it understands us better than we understand it. The technology it has is clearly far outdone us by any stretch of the imagination. And it's just interesting. Like, how do you communicate with something like this? And they slowly do it, you know? They start off with like charades and stuff, and then you have like the recording of certain sounds to mean certain words, and then having the echolocation, and like, you know that like he can't see the letters on a clock, so you have to like put a different layer on top of it so that he can see that you're showing him a clock, and then he shows you a clock of like what they use to measure time on their planet. It's like, oh, it's like all just super cool. And then there's the fact that Rocky and his species, I think it was Aredians or something like that. I wrote it down somewhere, but the fact that their society is so far advanced beyond our own, but they still lack very fundamental things. Like, they don't understand relativity, which is kind of insane how you can get to space without, well, I obviously can get to space, but like travel long distance space without like a good understanding of like relativity. It's kind of crazy. And then also radiation. They just don't understand that. Yeah, it's just super interesting. So there's a lot of great sci-fi stuff in this. And as a sci-fi fan, I was very happy. Then now in my notes are terrible. Here's going to be a very brief review with a very sporadic set of notes. So my second note here is about just all the scenes with Rocky initially. It's just so good. Like the first throw, like when he's trying to throw the little communication, whatever it was, the little pod he was basically trying to throw at Grace's ship. And the first throw is it's so scary, and you're anticipating what's going to happen. Oh my goodness. Because it could be a bomb, it could be a message, it could be something, it could be some virus that is sending over that'll kill you. And you don't know what's going to happen. That's so interesting. Then you get the second throw where it's Grace is obviously trying his hardest, is going on a spacewalk, and he's trying his hardest to catch it. It's so exciting. Then you get the third throw where obviously you realize at this point that the alien has adapted very well. And he throws it literally to where Grace was going to exit the ship, because he knew that that's where he needed to send the message. It's oh, this is interesting. The alien, Rocky in this case, knows he's adapting to Grace's responses to his throw. Another form of communication, right? It is probably the first, it's the second form of communication, right? The first thing was when he was tracking Grace's ship. The second thing is when he's throwing the message at Grace. And the third thing is when they're in the tunnel actually interacting, right? And I guess the fourth stage is right at the end of the movie where they're no longer interacting indirectly and Grace can literally communicate with him, right? So it's interesting, I like this progression of the communication too. Then there's the fact that the alien ship connects to the human ship and then builds a tunnel automatically and in a completely automatic way. It's super interesting. I like that element. There's the scene where Rocky is trying to teach Grace indirectly through doing the charades, I guess, to spin his ship so that they can both be spinning in concert with each other, so that they can simulate artificial gravity, make the communication easier, when they're in the tunnel. I thought that was really cool. There's obviously the echolocation, like I said, with the clocks. There's the survival norm of the Iridians, where they're completely paralyzed at night, and the fact that because of that, they've evolved as a society to have other people, basically whenever you sleep, you have another Iridian watch you sleep. What a cool idea for an alien species. You rarely see stuff like this explored when you have other, aliens, I guess, in general, in movies like this. So this was super cool. I guess, again, it all just stems from the fact that this is probably from a very well thought out book that I imagine the author, thought about all these details and put this all in. So I really, really like it. But there's that. And then the final thing is the fact that their two atmospheres, the human atmosphere with Grace and then the atmosphere of the Iridians and Rocky, are just so different. So they can never interact directly. They're always separated by a non-permeable barrier, right? Of that transparent material. What an interesting thing. And it's so cool when Rocky makes that little ball for him to go and run around in Grace's ship, because he contains his atmosphere into it. So that was really cool. And yeah. And then the final thing is right toward the end of the movie, which is that there's a dilemma toward the end of the movie where Grace kind of only has enough fuel to either go back home or to go and save Rocky and then head to Rocky's planet and live there forever. But the final kind of reveal, to me at least, who wasn't thinking about it, and maybe it's obvious if you're a better watcher of these, you have better media literacy or something like that, but there is a final reveal that Rocky's species, the Iridians, are able to make Grace a ship so that he can go home if he wants to. I just never considered this, but obviously by how advanced the Iridians are, they would definitely be able to make a ship that could do that could take him to back to Earth, and it was super interesting. Obviously he doesn't choose to do that. He wants to stay here and be a teacher, at least for the time being. But yeah, it's obviously this advanced species would be able to make you the ship, So I don't know, it was just all the just fun Rocky interaction stuff, the sci-fi stuff around it, the communication stuff around it, all of it is really, really good. Great stuff. Then obviously I haven't really touched on it at all, but the Rocky Grace relationship is obviously the core of this entire movie, right? It is the majority of the scenes are those two interacting. It is a very cute relationship. It's a little weird where it's it's a human and his pet in a way, but it's not really. Obviously Rocky is superior, probably way more intelligent than Grace, but the way he I don't know, he has dog energy or whatever, right? Where he's always excited. He's he's obviously on all fours and he's running around everywhere. I don't know, it's kind of imagine if a dog became sentient and was smarter than you, and it's oh, that's Rocky. So it's interesting. I like their relationship. And then there's the scene where, this is one of my favorite scenes, which is the scene where initially Grace is oh, it's a one-way mission, I've come to terms with it. And then Rocky says, Rocky will give you astrophage so you can head home. And he's how much would that set you back? And he's 6 years. And it's oh, that's too much, Rocky, I can't do that. But then he gives in and is yeah, I'll take it, thank you. And he breaks down crying. And I thought this was so genuine and so cute. It was a great scene, so I like that a lot. Then there's, what else is there in this relationship? There's him obviously going back and saving Rocky in the end was very cute. Obviously he cares about Rocky, how cute. And then at the end where he's living with Rocky on this planet, obviously, Rocky doesn't live there, I guess. It's a little orb that was created for Grace to live on, and I'm sure Rocky visits a bunch. But it's just super It's so cute. So I like the Grace Rocky relationship is just amazing. So we love that. There's also, I haven't touched on this at all, but the structure of the movie is also pretty cool, where it's and I wonder if the book does this or if the book is more linear, but this is like it's like you kind of got two storylines going on. You have the present day storyline with Grace waking up in space and not knowing at all what's happening. And then he eventually goes and meets Rocky. They work together. They solve the problem. They head back to Rocky's planet. At the same time, you have the storyline in the past of finding out why Grace was on the ship. Like the basically it is like a backstory of like when they discover the astrophage all the way until he gets launched into the ship, right? And you have these two storylines going on in parallel, and eventually you like find out that he never really wanted to be on the ship and they forced him, they drugged him to be there, right? It's an amazing, firstly, the reveal is really good. Like it really changes how you see the people back on Earth, where it's like they forced him, they gave him no choice, they drugged him up, and they knew that, you know, he would rise to the challenge, but at the same time it's a very bad thing that they did, right? But it's cool reveal. I like it. I like that it was a cool structure like this. It keeps you engaged, keeps you interested in the mystery, and eventually feel rewarded when you get an answer as to like why he's there, you know, or how he got there, I guess more so. So that was really cool. Now, there's two more things I want to talk about. One of them is just a quick thing about how the whole movie toward the latter half, sorry, not the whole movie, but like the latter half, I was very concerned because I was worried that we were going to end with him in space and we weren't going to get any reactions of people. Like the whole time, it's like the real, like the exciting part of the movie is that we're seeing a human interact with an alien, and it's like crazy. And it's like recording himself. He's like he's recording memos so that like he can send it back to Earth. And the whole time I'm like, please, I just want to see other people react to this. Like, what are the people on Earth going to think when they see like this alien that's like a rock and oh my god, it's like crazy. And then, oh my god, I was so scared because I was like, this movie has like 4 endings where like you keep thinking it's going to end at a certain point and then it just never ends. And then finally it does right at the end. And they really save the final reaction to really toward the end, where they get like, you see the main, I don't remember her name, but the main woman who was in charge of basically this entire operation on Earth, she sees some of the footage of Rocky and Grace interacting, and it's like, oh, I get to see it. I'm so excited we get this reaction. I do wish we got a bit more of it, but you know, it satisfied me. It wasn't, I was dreading that I was going to have to be like, man, I love this movie, but man, that ending disappointed me, but it didn't disappoint me. You know, it didn't amaze me in a certain way, but I'm still very happy with it. But yeah, so that's one thing. Now, the other thing to say is that just talking about the vibe of this movie, I think I had an interesting thought when I was watching it, which is that it gives slightly sci-fi blockbuster vibes, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Maybe it's like a little bit of a bad thing, like mainly for me because I like indie kind of feeling movies, right? And this certainly, like, it's a weird mix where it's like on some hand it gives you that like art house kind of feel a little bit, but at the same time it like slightly gives you like a blockbuster kind of feel. It's interesting. It has an interesting kind of feel to it. Now I have like a list of things I kind of want to talk about to kind of talk about this a bit more. But firstly, there's definitely a benefit to having this kind of like generic sci-fi blockbuster kind of feel, which is that it definitely would attract a wider audience. This is a movie that I think could be seen by basically anyone and probably enjoyed by basically anyone. Even a younger audience, I could imagine enjoying this. Like there's nothing too crazy, too scary or anything like that. Maybe there's like one explosion that you wouldn't want to have like really young kids watching, but beyond that, it's like a pretty tame movie. And this kind of generic, and not in a bad way. When I say generic, it sounds really bad, but it's like it has this kind of like blockbusterish kind of vibe to it a little bit. It makes it more mass appealing, which I like. So it is kind of cool. You can like recommend this to anyone, you know. But when I like say genericism here, or like kind of this blockbuster feel, I have like a kind of spectrum here that I want to go through. And maybe you'll completely disagree with me, which is very possible. But on one end, we have like the very indie feeling stuff, which is like, I don't know, all the A24 stuff, you know, like the Ex Machinas, the Florida Project, you know, things like that. You've got Circle, which is a movie that I've seen, if anyone's seen that. The Platform, Coherence, like a sci-fi movie I recently watched. Like, and maybe even something like Blade Runner 2049 could fit into this, where it's like, you've got like these feel very different and art house and like not generic in any sense whatsoever, not a blockbuster, like not everyone is going to like these movies. And then Blade Runner 2049 is like right on the cusp of it, where it's like, oh, we might be slightly treading into like blockbuster territory, right? Then we have the like barely slightly, like maybe a little bit, tiny bit blockbuster, which is like Mad Max Fury Road, where it's like, this is definitely like it's a little bit blockbuster. Definitely still like very interesting and unique and art house and interesting tone. You've got like I would say the Dune movies kind of fall into this, where they're like a little bit like, they're probably more on the indie end or like feeling like art house kind of ish, but they're also a bit more blockbuster. And then you've got like Arrival as well, I would probably categorize into this, where it's like there is some slight like the tiny like blockbuster elements to it, but for the most part it feels very like kind of different. Then you've got the slightly blockbuster. This is where I would put Project Hail Mary, which is like, it's up there with things like Prometheus, you know, like, which is pretty different, especially like compared to all the other Alien movies, but also like just movies in general, like blockbusters, but also has quite a lot of like elements that feel blockbusterish to it. Something like Snowpiercer as well, which feels like very different, but has a few like famous actors and stuff, and it feels like a little bit blockbuster. Or the second Planet of the Apes movie, like Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. The first one feels very like, it probably in the next category after this, but like the second movie feels a little bit like, mostly like, you know, it's in between. It's like mostly independent art house kind of feeling, but also a little bit blockbuster. Then you got like the pretty blockbuster, which is like all the Nolan movies, like Interstellar, Inception, maybe the first like Rise of the Planet of the Apes, like I said, like also that's the pretty blockbuster. And then you have like the most generic blockbuster sci-fi movies of all time, which is like the movie 2012, like the Apocalypse movie. That's like the most generic blockbuster I could ever think of. Guardians of the Galaxy, you know, stuff like that. Godzilla versus Kong, World War Z, you know, stuff like that. This would all be like the most generic kind of blockbuster thing, which doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. Like most of those movies I listed, I love. Like 2012 is at least a 4 out of 5 for me. But yeah, it's a spectrum, and I think right in the middle is Project Hail Mary. Probably slightly toward like it doesn't feel that blockbusterish, but at the same time it does. There are elements to it. Like moments that come to mind are like I don't know, it's like the kind of, there's like tropes in the story that have been overdone that kind of feel like things that you would typically see in blockbusters. Like one is the astronaut waking up all alone and like trying to figure out where he is. Like moments like that kind of feel a bit blockbusterish. And it's going to sound dumb because blockbusterish kind of basically just means mass appeal, makes a lot of money, like stuff like that, right? But these are the kind of things that you see in those types of movies. You've got like the premise of like going on a temporary mission to a planet, and it looks like things are about to go like really bad, but you manage to escape at the last second. Like that whole thing on the planet, like right at the end where they go to the green planet and they try and they're trying to basically fish for this bacteria that's going to save the planet. It feels a bit like that's like a bit of a blockbuster kind of scene where it's like purely action for action's sake, and you know exactly what's going to happen. They're going to struggle, but they're going to get away eventually, right? There's the Rocky like sacrificing himself thing midway through, where he's like, he sees that Grace is in danger, so he like destroys the barrier around him and goes into Grace's atmosphere so that he can save Grace. It's like a little bit like generic blockbusterish kind of. So that was subverted, which I will say, so I wouldn't really count that as like a general thing here, where it felt like it was going down that route, but they really did subvert that, and I did actually really like that Rocky basically survives that. So that was interesting. And then the goodbye scene with Rocky for the first time when they first leave each other. And it's like a reference to their early scenes where they're dancing and mimicking each other. And it feels like, you know, I've seen this a million times in like blockbuster stuff. So there are elements like that. Doesn't necessarily mean it's like the worst thing in the world, but it's just things I wanted to mention, I guess. But yeah. So this movie was fantastic. I love it a lot. Obviously, I've said a million things here that are good reasons for why I love it. Even this generic blockbuster thing doesn't really distract it at all. It's just like a different vibe to it. And I like the vibe, so it's fantastic. Now, there is one drawback, which I haven't mentioned whatsoever at all, which is pretty impressive for me. I have managed to hold it back, which is the only reason this gets a 4 out of 5 and why there were many points in this movie that I didn't enjoy, which is, without a doubt, the comedy. This is just, I just don't like the comedy pretty much whatsoever in this movie. There are certain exceptions, which we'll talk about, but for the most part, this is not my style of comedy. Like, the jokes feel incredibly, like, obvious, and they kind of like ruin the tone a bit, and they feel a little bit like MCU style. Like I just don't like this at all. So what have I got in my notes? I have there's like a few things I wrote that like came to mind immediately as like these are moments that definitely stood out as like bad comedy, but you're either going to agree with me or not going to agree with me, so I don't know why I'm bothering to do this. But in case you're curious what like took me out of this, firstly, before I go into any of this list, let's just say that like none of the Rocky based comedy really stood out to me as like particularly bad. Like I think all the stuff where like Rocky is like when he's like running through the lab and stuff, and that's like a funny scene. That's not that bad, right? That's like fine. I can tolerate that. I'm talking more about like moments that make it feel like, oh, we need to like make sure this movie is lighthearted a bit, or like this story has like we need to like make the tone a bit more like comedic or something. Like I just don't like that. Like it feels a bit, I don't know. But moments that are coming to mind are like things like the first scene of the movie. I think it was the first scene where he's like waking up after the coma, and it's like obviously a scene which is like they're trying to search for laughs, and I don't like that when like a movie it's like so obvious that they're like trying to make the audience, the wide audience who's sitting in the theater right now, laugh. When it's like the AI who's like trying to probe him and like do the wake up routine after the coma, the AI doesn't really understand him properly, so there's like miscommunication issues there, which is like meant to be funny. And the way he's like wriggling around in his like suit, and the suit comes off and he looks like a worm, and he's like he just doesn't, like, when he points at that thing and is like, well, that's a thing I shouldn't know, and I know it. And it's like, oh, okay, it's like the most, I don't know. I just don't like this comedy whatsoever. But scenes like that, I don't like that. There's the scenes where he's like locked away inside the little sealed off chamber on Earth, and he's like experimenting with the astrophage. And then you've got all the government officials who are watching him in this like sealed room, and they're basically, he's like, oh, I feel expendable or whatever. And then all the government officials like turn and they talk to each other or whatever. And the lady talks to them, and they turn and they turn back and they're like, the consensus is that we prefer you not die. And I'm like, okay, whatever. Just bad comedy here. There's one flash that happens, or like one cut, a very quick cut, or like a comedic cut that happens, but I really didn't like, which is when, I think it was Grace, when he's like, don't worry, the best minds in the world are on it. When he's like talking to his kids about like who's going to save us from the Petrova line. And then you do a hard cut to him in space, like all disheveled and like not really understanding anything and like unshaved, and he's all alone. And the joke is that like obviously he is not the best mind to be on this, but he is, right? I don't know, scenes like this, like, and even like just small things like when the gravity turns on after he's like spun the ship with Rocky, and as soon as the gravity turns on, you're like, oh, this is great. And then he trips over something, and it's like, okay, the most obvious joke we could have done, we did it. So I don't know, obviously there's a million more examples like this throughout the movie that make this like really annoying to me, but there's a few. One is that either you're going to get it or you're not, so I'm sorry if you just disagree with me here. And the other thing is that like, these are just ones that came to mind immediately. So I'm not listening to more, but yeah, that's the comedy point. Now, I have a few miscellaneous things that I wanted to mention. One is when they visit the actual alien planet midway through, or like toward the end of the movie, when they are trying to fish for the bacteria that's going to save Earth, basically. There's a brief moment where you see the skyline of the planet, and I think Grace like takes it in for a moment, and I'm like, oh, this is like amazing. It looks so cool. Like the visuals of that planet look really cool. And it is like awe-inspiring of like, man, he's like on another planet right now. That's like crazy. Yeah. There's the singing scene in the flashback where the main lady who is in charge of like this entire operation, she like starts singing. At first I was like, oh, this is like going on a bit too long. We basically see her sing the entire song, but it is very cute at the end when she's like, she basically doesn't wrap up the song, but she sings a large chunk of it. At the end, she says, and that is enough. And she like walks away midway through. And it's like, oh, look at this. Like she had her moment of like expressing herself, and now she's like getting back to her typical personality, which is like kind of being a bit dismissive and cold. And she like walks away, and it's like very cute. Whereas like clearly she wanted to be happy in this moment. She was happy in this moment, but she's like a little embarrassed by what just happened. She's like walking away. So it added to her character a bit that I really like. So that scene was really great. What else is then by miscellaneous stuff? Oh, then we have these are like very small things, and these are my final two notes. One is that I would be so scared if I was in Grace's position to go on Rocky's ship, just because of the fact that they don't know anything about radiation, which would mean that they like, I don't know how they would have designed the ship at all to like survive space if you don't know anything about radiation. So that was interesting, but I would be very scared to go on that ship. And then the final note I have is that this movie, I guess it's like directing wise or like visual wise, or not cinematography, it probably is just directing wise. It does a very good job of conveying the feeling of a vacuum, where everything around the ship looks like infinitely far away, where it just feels like the ship is in the middle of nothing. And it would take you eons to get anywhere of like note. Yeah, it just does such a good job. I think it's like the first time you see outside like the circle window of the ship, and the stars just look flat, as though it's like there is no distance. They're all just like so far away from you that no matter how far you travel, they're just always going to be far away. And it just makes it feel so empty and like you're in the middle of nowhere, which you're in space, right? You're literally in a vacuum. Man, it's an awe-inspiring feeling. So what can I say? Good visual. But that's all I've got for Project Hail Mary. This was surprisingly, I enjoyed this far more than I ever thought I would. But yeah, if you haven't seen this for some reason, go watch it. I don't know why on earth. You know what? If you are watching this review and you haven't seen the movie, leave a comment, because I'm very curious what type of people would be doing that. But yeah. Anyway, thanks for watching. Subscribe right now, and see you next time.